Well, welcome everyone to our last panel on the relationship between forest and business. Thank you, Manuel. Thank you, Camilo, for joining us. In this particular panel, we're going to be talking with two private brand suppliers from Ara. Manuel, representing Daabon, who supplies Ara with private brand oils containing palm oil, but also other products such as soaps. And Manuel, as was mentioned, coffee, particularly on the sourcing of coffee, and obviously develops our private brand of coffee. And I'm honored to be presenting it and to be moderating because, well, I'm Colombian, and we have seen in the very first part of all the discussion that Colombia is a biodiversity hotspot. According to the World Bank, Colombia hosts approximately 10% of the world's biodiversity. With less than 1% of the land. Colombia is the #1 country in birds, in orchids, but also the richest countries in amphibians, in mammals, and in other plants, including palms. And also, for some context, approximately 52% of the land in Colombia is forests. And for you to have an image of what we saw on the big pictures this morning, Colombia, that's almost 60 million of hectares, 7 times the Portugal land. So the first question, and both companies have operations not only in Colombia, but also in international markets. And we are talking about coffee and palm oil. From your operations and perspective, is in Colombia coffee and palm oil a relevant source of deforestation? We can start with Manuel, please.
Thank you, Juan. Good afternoon to everybody. Palm is not a deforestation factor in Colombia. The reality of the Colombian agricultural landscape and deforestation causes is more due to cattle ranching and clearing the lands for them. Over 60% of deforestation is caused by this. The second factor that mostly influences this is illegal activities, either cultivation of coca or illegal mining, approximately 30%. So that last 10%, what does palm oil contribute? In the last 10 years, less than 2%, 1.5%. Now, to put it into perspective, in that same period, palm as an industry has grown 3 times fold. So it shows you that we can grow sustainably in the region and generate jobs and incomes for people that need it.
Thank you, Manuel. I don't know if you have that data in your mind, but I remember that approximately in Colombia there are 40 million hectares available to produce foods. What amount of that land is today in palm?
Yeah, it's a very relevant factor, especially for palm. Today, we have approximately 7 million hectares available for agriculture, of which 5 million are adequate for growing palm without deforestation. This is a very relevant topic, especially because Indonesia has gone through a memorandum of no further expanding. Malaysia has run out of space, and they need to replace the old palms that they have, which are inefficient, for new ones. To put you into context on the macroeconomics of this, this means that this now very accessible priced product will become more expensive because there is no more land to produce it, and demand keeps on growing, not only on food and non-food applications, but in biofuels. So having a frontier of 5 million hectares without suffering any deforestation in Colombia is a golden opportunity for our nation to develop this industry sustainable.
Okay, thank you. From your perspective, is coffee a relevant source of deforestation in Colombia?
Actually, no. Only 4.5% of municipalities where coffee is grown are related or linked to areas where we have a high deforestation risk. And there are different reasons for that. One is that coffee growing is an activity that has been in the country for more than a century. It's based on small landowners, and the agricultural frontiers are very well defined. This is one reason. The second reason is that the coffee growers and the government have been promoting productivity and increase of yields, and not expanding the coffee plantations. We have had for the last 10 to 20 years the same 840,000 hectares in coffee. They have not changed, and let's say the disposable land that we have usually is not available for coffee. Third, forest is very important in the coffee production. Around 37% of the coffee produced in Colombia is grown under shade. It's very important for the microclimate, for the ecosystems, and to keep the soil healthy. You know, erosion is a big factor in Colombia, especially because coffee is grown in the mountain slopes. So growers usually take good care of the forest. Fourth, water. Water is very important for Colombian coffee. You know, Colombian coffee is washed Arabica, so water plays a very important role in the quality of Colombian coffee and why people pay more for Colombian coffee. So usually farmers take good care of the forest and on the water streams to be able to have this availability. So there is no real incentive in Colombia for deforestation. I think Manuel has already shared with us which are the main activities for deforestation. The only thing I would like to add is that this happens in Colombia mainly in conflict and post-conflict regions where land tenure and governance is very weak. So this is somehow enabling these illicit activities, which somehow are the ones reshaping the deforestation in Colombia.
So, and you have mentioned something that I think has been a very important strategy in order to be productive. It is the rejuvenation of the crops,
Right.
of the plantations in Colombia. I would now ask you how you, from the work you do, make sure where the products come from and how it is made. Because, well, again, even though we don't see in Colombia high risk in the cultivation of these two main crops in deforestation, would be very useful for us to know how your companies do that traceability and get to know how the product is sourced.
I will start. Okay. So in order to respond that question, we have to give some context of the complexity and the granularity of the supply chain of coffee in Colombia. So we are speaking about 540,000 farms, which is almost double of the farms in Brazil, spread all across the country in 660 municipalities out of the 1,100, and each of them produces around, not production, but the average size of a farm in Colombia is less than 5 hectares. So if we take the total production of Colombia, which is 13.5 to 14.5 million bags, each farm will be contributing with between 25 to 30 bags to the total production. So it's a huge challenge to understand where the coffee is coming from, but it's not impossible. And the only way to do it is to leverage on partners that have the, let's say, the end-to-end capacity in the supply chain to understand and a comprehensive understanding of the supply chain to have all this information. So we as a company, we rely mainly in cooperatives and international coffee trading houses with big, let's say, deep roots in Colombia. Around 90% of the coffee we buy is coming from these kind of companies, and we have worked with them for at least 20 years. So in coffee, we really need to rely on the supply chain.
Okay, thank you.
In our case, our family business began in organic agriculture. With that setting of the scene, by the year 2000, when the RSPO was created, we welcomed it as the first company in Latin America to be certified. At this point, we created that this is the one standard that we do agriculture, and that's what we expect from anybody that we buy from. So if you would like to be part of our supply chain, you have to be compliant with these certifications. Today, around 50% of our production comes from our own plantations, and the other 50% we purchase and have partner plantations.
Okay, thank you. And let's talk a little bit about a time or a moment when deforestation risks have, or if in any moment have had any impact on the supply chain. And Manuel.
So deforestation's risk, I can give you a story. Very recently in 2003, an organization from the Netherlands, for everybody that knows, IUCN is the National Nature Conservation Union, and they released a report on Colombia about deforestation. And the methodology that they picked was, we're going to put a mill in the middle, create a radius of 100 kilometers, and any deforestation that's around it is associated to that activity. That's very short-sighted, because it's not the reality. It's not the reality of that mill that they selected in our operation. Is very close to a violent area, where we went inside to try to generate jobs and take people out of violent areas and poverty. And now we got blamed for the executions that people have done there. They actually had to retract after we showed them the evidence. But that information got shared in Europe, and people started calling us, and it's not correct. So the risk of deforestation also associated to the reputational risk of we're the people on the ground doing the work, but then there is entities that choose methodologies to analyze or judge how the operations on the ground are running, which are not reflecting the reality of what happens. Beyond that particular case, I can share a social issue case, which is also a big factor. And it is going into places where plantations have been abandoned because of violence again, and taking us approximately 2.5 years of negotiations to come an agreement with the unions, in which the conclusion was they just want decent jobs, security, and be treated fairly. That's what people want. The only way in which we could actually give them this was by having certified plantations, fully traceable, asking for premiums to the international markets, and giving the premiums to the farmers. That's how we make it. So I feel very disappointed when I see products on shelves that say no palm oil. When we put all this effort into the system to take people out of poverty, and then people claiming that they shouldn't have palm oil in their products. Where should I sell it then? It's a real issue.
And we can say here that additionally about when we discuss on deforestation, it is not only about trees, it's about also people. And that, I think, it's a very relevant element to consider. In your case, Camilo.
Let's say the best example we can share is in mainly certification challenge, and it's very specific to Colombia. So when we were working with our partners in understanding and all the due diligence, risk assessment process, and when we were comparing the polygons of the farms against the satellite images, we started getting a lot of deforestation alerts in regions that we knew there was no deforestation. So after a long due diligence and very deep diving into the data, we understood and we found out that it was mainly because of renovation practices that are very common in Colombia, like pruning or replanting the coffee. So that was one step. But the main challenge came afterwards because it was more than 1,500 farms along the country that we needed to check and to collect all the evidence. So we had, and this is a good example of how this kind of requirements need the effort of all the stakeholders in the supply chain. So we had to use the growers themselves, taking pictures and sending information to us. We had to use the cooperatives to send people to some regions to do the risk assessment, to get all the information. We had to send people ourselves to the coffee fields. And we also leveraged on the data from some coffee-related entities from the government to collect all the information. And finally, let's say we can have all the proper due diligence and information in case these false positives come at any point. So again, I think the main message, and especially in coffee and in Colombia, it's we need the commitment and work of all the supply chain to be able to be fully compliant with UDR.
Okay, thank you so much. We are running out of time, but I would let's move a little bit to the European Union scenario, and we have discussed not only in the previous panels, but at the morning with the presentation of Eurocommerce of the European deforestation, the EUDR. And you both have operations not only in Colombia, but at international markets. I also saw a magazine from Daabon that states very clearly, we are prepared to comply with the EUDR. I'm gonna resume in 3 questions in one. Do you have differentiated strategies for each market? How are you preparing to comply with the EUDR? And the last one that I think it's very useful also having the discussion that the EUDR is being, or probably for small business is gonna be delayed, but also simplified. If you had the opportunity to send a message for key opinion leaders, but policymakers related with this regulation, what that would be and why?
That's a lot of information in one. Okay, keeping it short, in terms of different strategies, agriculturally speaking, one policy. All of the agricultural asset has to follow one standard, but it's going to go to 2 different markets, asking for 2 different premiums. But the base has to be the same. You have to run it that way to be efficient. In terms of preparation for the EUDR, because our backgrounds is in organics and sustainable, we've always had a certification team. We've always had traceability to prove the organic certificate. So when we saw the EUDR coming, it's actually quite simple for us to comply, but that doesn't mean the rest of the industry is ready for this. Very simple example, tanks. In our industry, we work with liquids, not with solids. How many tanks do you think we have in the farm? How many tanks are in the refinery? How many tanks are at the port? We have RSPO, we have EUDR. Some people want one, people want the other one. How many tanks do you think I have? We already have a plan to build and double the amount of tanks because of this. Who's going to pay for this? These are the infrastructure things that I wonder, did Brussels think about this? Because these are legacy systems. So in terms of feedback, I would like to share with you what we saw that happened last year in the markets in terms of the reflection of the cost that this is accounting for, because it's a public traded commodity. In the world of palm, we were talking around 5 to 7% over premiums in the palm markets. But in palm kernel, which is an ingredient that you use for oleochemicals, we're talking about 20 or 25% premiums over. The price usually reflects the level of complexity, and the level of complexity, the level of scarcity of people that can actually comply with this regulation. So what the changes presented yesterday help somewhat, but you still don't fix the infrastructure problem.
Okay, thank you. And in your case?
Let's say the strategy, it's market-oriented somehow. So obviously, Europe, EUDR has to be EUDR compliant. But, for example, we have potential clients in the US that don't want EUDR. Some of them are requesting EUDR, either because the products are going to end up in Europe, or because of social responsibility and sourcing strategies they want to promote or to support the initiative. And they are also able to pay for the premium. In coffee, usually most of the companies are charging between 3 to 6 cents per pound for EUDR compliant coffee. And in some markets like Central and South America, there is no real incentive for people to pay this, because they won't be able to pass this through the chain to the final consumer, or sometimes because they don't even care. So we have to segregate the strategies. And the second thing that is shaping our strategies is the suppliers' capabilities. So we know that around 60% of the total capacity of our suppliers, it's EUDR compliant, and we can offer this volume to them. But this additional 40% is something we still cannot offer as EUDR compliant. So it's still some work to be done in the supply chain. What we have been doing with our suppliers, and as this is mainly a joint effort from the whole supply chain, we have to monitor what they are doing, and understanding that everything that they have built up for the risk assessment is proper. It has the quality, the data is what we need, so we can ensure our customers that they won't have any issues. So this is mainly what we are doing.
Okay, thank you so much. With that, we get to the end of this conversation. I just would resume on simplicity, cooperation. Thank you so much for your valuable insights and for joining us in this last panel, and for you and all you for the attention. Thank you very much.